They're here for the important part.
Exactly. We put the money in the machine.
Yeah, exactly. We got the old mouse back on the treadmill.
Johnny was complaining in the ad break there about the Derry Galway game.
In response to what Andy was actually saying.
I never said a word, Johnny.
We're going to talk. We're going to talk with Michael Meehan about that a little bit later on. So let's focus for now on Kerry Dublin. Kerry nearly choked. Is that what happened? Did they get in their own heads? Because in that first half they were killing Dublin, and if the penalty goes in, I think it could be a 10-15 point hammering.
Yeah, I don't think it'd be that, but I think if the penalty goes in, yeah, they're able to manage the game a little bit better. Like they were 6 up at one stage, and you're kind of thinking to yourself, okay, I know the wind was a bit of a factor. Clifford had a number of shots which kind of could have sneaked over, and kind of they were probably thinking for every 2 that Dublin get, we just need to get 1. You know, we just need to keep the scoreboard ticking, and they missed those, and they missed a couple of them. And my biggest worry for Kerry is, and it's funny, you know, people talk about it being a 25-man kind of panel and definitely a 20-man game, and it most certainly is. And again, over the weekend, I didn't see anyone really bringing someone off the bench that made a massive, massive difference to the game. Like, actually, Paddy Small had the biggest influence, I really feel, because he came on and he gave Dublin something completely different. He gave them a lot of physicality in the full forward line, kind of a la O'Callaghan. And it's strange, actually, why they probably didn't start him, considering, I know his game in the quarterfinal wasn't fantastic, but he does offer something different. But the Kerry bench didn't do a whole pile. You know, like Spillane came on, Moynihan came on. I know he got a score, he was busy, but there's no real, like as a cornerback or a fullback, you know, Dublin switched Davy Byrne in very quickly, which was a good move as well because it was a fresh fullback coming in. But they didn't set the world alight. Like Spillane, I think, got off 1 shot, maybe 2, missed both. You know, Clifford was struggling at the time at that stage. Paddy Clifford was probably a little bit spent. They were definitely spent around the middle.
They didn't choke. It was more they were spent.
I think it was.
It was warm. And they weren't in the heat of battle like that all year, and they were physically wrecked. Like, I don't think they choked. I think they were actually physically and mentally, they were a bit wrecked by the end.
Yeah, and they were probably caught a little bit in trying to manage it. Like, if you have a target, in other words, if you're Dublin and you're chasing down the target, it's a lot easier, you know, and then you get a score, and then you have fellas piling forward, and you just get that enthusiasm and that motivation and that kind of intensity up. But whereas your Kerry, you're caught between that rock and a hard place of, do we push on and keep tagging on, or do we kind of try to control it at times? And again, Kerry aren't the type of team, we spoke about this about Galway are not the type of team either who can control games. Their DNA says go for it, kick scores, keep rattling at it, and Kerry, I think, get caught in that a little bit as well, because at times Dublin put a massive press on them, and Dublin did pressure them big time, and all hats off to Dublin. Like, I mean, they were dead and buried, and they resurrected themselves with basically their 3 main leaders, which is Fenton, Kilkenny and McCarthy, essentially. And Kilkenny had an unbelievable game, kicking some fantastic scores at vital times. But I think it's a worry for Kerry, and I think the lack of bench coming on, especially in the forward and full forward, is a bit of a worry for them.
Ray Orr says, another day and that Costello goal would have been the talk of the game, but it's probably not even in the top 3 talking points. It was a sensational finish.
Sensational finish, especially after the first half he had, because, like, I mean, I said to myself, I don't think he's going to come out at the start of the second half. He was quite poor. He couldn't really get onto the ball, made 1 or 2 really bad decisions, gave a terrible hand pass away, and you're kind of saying, of the forwards, Dublin need to do something here at half time to get this thing G'd up a bit. And I felt
if they were going to win this year, that Costello would have to be a Footballer of the Year contender, and that was the game for it to happen in the first half. But in the first half, none of them played well.
But you know what, Jerry, he wasn't far off Footballer of the Year coming into this game. Like, I mean, he has had a pretty sensational year, but of course Thomas Sullivan just went on to him, and like that's if you ever want a fella who's going to wreck your Footballer of the Year, he's going to do it.
Well, he should be in the conversation for it, right?
Oh, absolutely. Like, he came up, kicked an unbelievable score. Yeah. Like, but if you watch him, if you watch the game back, just watch his man marking off Costello. Like, literally, he does it so well. He some guys mark you. You know, they do a man marking job on you, and they're all over you and they're grabbing you, and they're kind of, but what happens is they nearly get too close to you. So what happens is you're able to grab them and you're actually able to wrestle them out of the way, and then you're gone. O'Sullivan always leaves a gap because he realises he has the pace to actually get you when he needs to, and then instantly as Kerry win the ball, he's gone.
Yeah.
He's gone. So, like, I mean, Costello spent a fair bit of time.
Back.
To be fair to him, he did it, but he was chasing up and down the field. So it is a massive thing to have for them. But, you know, again, the Kerry full back line and that Kerry central kind of area with Morley inside was very, very solid. And only a couple of times did it get breached, and kind of where you thought there was a little bit of panic in there. But again, as I said, I think if O'Callaghan is fit, it's a different game, of course, right? And there are ifs, buts and injuries, and we've spoken about this before. But I think what it does is it tips the hat to Comer, right, in that physical player at full forward. You know, can they handle... Like, Kelly's not a big man. Kelly used to play half forward for Galway, you know, and then he kind of came into the habit. He's not a big three. He's a guy who makes those lung bursting runs, but as a physical, you know, an individual, a kind of bear on the square, he's not that. And, you know, so what you have is you have Comer. You have, you know, Kelly, obviously, who's your full back. You've got Clifford in against Kelly, which is going to be another big man, 6'4", putting a lot of pressure on a smaller individual, and that I think is an issue for Galway. But then on the far side, I think Foley is well equipped. He's played very, very well, and he's in the line for an All-Star if you ask me. So he's done quite well in that full forward line, and I think he will handle Comer a little bit better than the far end.
Okay, so like, you understand why Kerry are favourites, and it's a significant level that they're ahead. The questions are managing game and the bench.
Yeah, I think managing the game, the bench. I think Moran has had a great comeback, you know, but I think he's 40 minutes plus, and then he's out of there. I think he tired. The goal
very sloppy mistake for the goal as well.
Yeah, the goal comes from, you know.
But you'll be interested to find, because Conroy's not the most mobile either, and defensively he's not amazing. But that's negated by the fact that Moran isn't either. So Galway, I think, will be hopeful in that regard in terms of midfield.
Yeah, I think they will, and you know, when you go back to the game on Saturday, Conroy was kind of negated a lot, really, you know, and as was Glass. So the two of them kind of nearly just put a mark on each other and just said, well, we're both kind of just going to put the hex on each other a little bit. So he didn't really get into the game as much as he can. He didn't have as much influence. McDade probably had more of an influence, to be fair to him, even though he was kind of switching on to Glass as well. But I think their engine room is fine. O'Connor will be fine. Barry came on and did quite a good job yesterday because he hasn't really got much game time. I think they're okay around there with Spillane and stuff. It's more that inside forward line. You know, when I start to look at the matchups, and I know we can get into this closer to the time, but the Paddy Clifford matchup was going to be essential, and Dublin they did quite a good job on that yesterday, I felt.
So the Con, if Con changes the game so much, what do you do in a scenario like this? Because I did feel like if in previous years what Dublin would have done was they would have had a backup plan, and they would have had the backup plan in gestation for a long period of time. If scenario A happens where Con is injured, and his injury profile, you know, because he's a very abrasive player, he does get injured and he does pick up knocks, so it's not like it's a complete shock. In the past, for example, they developed Owen O'Gara, who the rest of the country thought there's no reason for this, there's no need for this. Look at the lavish gifts you have in your forward line. Yeah. And Jim was like, I need him because he's going to do a very specific job for me at various times. They couldn't do that this year. They didn't get somebody, like, they didn't, for all that happened in the absence in the league, when Con wasn't there, they didn't have a backup plan. And in the first half, they looked pedestrian. Kerry seemed very happy to give them the ball, knowing, okay, you're going to shoot, those shots are going to be 40, 60, and actually it ended up being like load of wides that drained the life out of the crowd in particular, and gave Kerry that very manageable lead that they had.
It's funny, like, I think they had 6 wides to, you know, Kerry 1 or 2 in that first half, and a lot of them were, as you say, just kind of, you know, just eking past the post, and you're kind of going, and you could feel the enthusiasm, as you say, and the energy out of the crowd and out of the players going down. They nearly had to bring the ball bursting very, very close to the goal. McCarthy coming in on runs, guys coming in on runs, and then off the shoulder. So they weren't able to just ping that pass in to the D. They tried it once or twice. And the Kerry lads got hands in and actually won the ball. So they were definitely missing that focal point. They were absolutely missing that focal. That's why I say Paddy Small, I thought, could have started, because he belies, actually. I heard someone on the commentary team saying he's not a big man. He is a big man. He's 6'2". He's very, very strong. He's predominantly left-footed, so he gives you that something a little bit different in there, and he's well able to win a ball. And I thought he did cause issues. He caused issues for that Kerry defence when he came in, because he's different and he is quite a power runner. He steps and comes inside you, and he has like, the one thing about O'Callaghan and why he's such a nightmare to mark is he wins the ball, that's number one. So as a defender, some fellas like to ship it off, and you kind of say, okay, well, I'm not going to get shown up, someone else is here, but he won the ball. He will win the ball and will take you on every single time. Now that, for you as a defender, is the winning of the ball. If you can't get out in front of him, because he is so strong and because he plays quite low to the ground. Now, I know but his centre of gravity is pretty low, even though he's quite tall enough. But he turns and he crouches down a lot, right? So he comes at you kind of like Comer. Comer's physical size, he plays smaller, if you get me. He's more like a barrel. So when he hits you and when he comes at you, like the goal, if you see the goal that he turns Rodgers inside out, like he turns on a sixpence and is around Rodgers before he even knows it. And if you also watch, Rodgers plays him with his back to the play, which is always very dangerous against a big physical fella, because what can happen is, if I'm marking, say, a guy who's smaller than me and I'm playing with my back to the play, I can hit him with my hands and stop him as he goes to move, because he's smaller than me. But if you're marking a guy who's bigger than you or equal size, he can throw you out of the way. You don't know where the ball is, of course, and then he's onto it in a flash. So Dublin really missed that. Dean Rock isn't that. Costello certainly isn't that.
Could they have put Kilkenny in?
That's what they could have done. But I think they needed Kilkenny out around the half-forward line, so you were probably robbing Peter to pay Paul. I thought they would have switched Kilkenny in, because I thought Kilkenny has drifted in there during games, especially in the league, and he's been a menace in full forward. Do you remember a couple of seasons ago they really tried him in there for a time? And I thought this was, well, if we ever need a Con-esque, or even the two of them in there, I thought they just needed to do something different to that full forward, because everyone knew, with the way Kerry have been defensively set up, they are trying to trap you in that honeypot. They're trying to get you in there, and then they close in on you. So everyone knew that it actually has to be fastball in there to try and unlock that defence.
It's incredibly small margins as well. Like, Scully probably shouldn't have taken the point on. And then do you give away a free, like, even 50, 55 yards out? It was like, just manage the game.
I was surprised they didn't do
I think Dublin would have won in extra time. I would have fancied Dublin, like, in terms of the bench maybe, and also
hard to know. Like,
I think they would have been favourites in terms of the way the game had gone, because Kerry looked a bit spent to me.
Well, they certainly, you would have been able to whisper into Kerry's ears, geez lads, you had this. You had this, but we've got you now.
But I think if you look at the way O'Connor celebrated at the end, like, this Kerry team have been coming up against Dublin now for a long number of years and been sending them back down the road, right, with the tail between their legs. And the Kerry-Dublin rivalry and
Kerry
all
were
this.
favourites, but you do forget that.
Absolutely. So this was an enormous. This was a 500-pound gorilla off their back. Like, you could see, it wasn't just beating Dublin; it was beating this Dublin team, who have had all the success over the last number of years. And for like, that is. You can't really, of course you're going to tighten up, you are going to tighten up as you come in, because you're seeing the winning post, but yet here they come. And at 60 something minutes, when Kilkenny gets that next score and even a point behind, you're saying, this is squeaky bum time.
The one thing that this Dublin team doesn't have that the other teams had, they would have taken that and they would have got a lead. And they never got a lead.
No.
So we never got to see what Kerry would do when they were behind in that circuit. So there was so they got level, and Kerry win the free. I thought that was a harsh free at the end, but anyway,
thought it was a bit harsh as well, actually.
The previous one, was But look,
previous one to go one up.
There's a clash there.
Yeah, it was handy enough.
The replay suggested it was harsh, definitely.
But they just couldn't get the lead. Whereas, like, the Gavin era, in fairness, completely different team with much better forwards. Always, when they got the opportunity, they went ahead and they were like, "Now, let's see what you're made of."
Yeah, let's see what you're made of. So for that question mark, but I think if you weigh up the importance of this win for this Kerry team against the tradition and the history of the last 10 years against Dublin, albeit it's not the exact same Dublin team, but it still has exactly. It doesn't matter to them. It's still the blue jersey. That, I think, was always going to, and that's why they did kind of limp over it. Like, they limped over the line, But there's been plenty of games where Dublin have just kind of limped over the line in the last 10 years. Yes, exactly. So I think it's an enormous game for that Kerry group to kind of come of age, right? And then
I think you saw this from Galway and Armagh, where Galway mentally on Saturday were just very, very relaxed because they got over that horrific Armagh situation where they nearly threw it away, and I think that stands you.
Yeah, well, it does, of course it does, because you can go back on videos and you can say, listen, these are the scenarios that we were in, and here are, it's not necessarily the scores, it's the moments that happen maybe prior to a score. So it's a fella getting a block, it's a fella going for a ball, it's saying, if you do not make that run, we don't potentially get out of our defence, and therefore all of these little pieces show what we're about. And you can kind of, you can re-emphasise that as a coach and a manager, and what it does is it gives the players and saying, actually, okay, we're doing all the right things. And that's why it was a little bit, I did feel that Kerry in the second half was kind of like, just get the ball to Clifford and he'll score for us, which of course he did in the first half. But when it wasn't really working, it was kind of going,
what's next?
Yeah.
Sean O'Shea's 24 this week or next week. This is the coming of age. There's the possibility that this is a team who is stacked enough to be able to go on and dominate for a couple of years. So maybe that's what they sense, that opportunity is there for them. Here's a question from Sean Brennan on our YouTube stream. Will Kerry repeat Mayo last year, beat the Dubs and fail at the final hurdle? They don't have quite the same psychological baggage as Mayo do.
Not quite. Look, I think I go back to that is a monkey off their back. But I think Galway are, first of all, Galway, I'm not saying neither team are run by lads who just came off the street, but Galway's management team, for me, so people will be like, and look, Johnny and myself were slagging the game. I recorded the Galway Derry game and I watched it back, and I tend to do that anyway because I like to stop them and go back and watch scores, and I particularly do it a lot with Ulster teams because I like to fast forward the game a lot because just some parts of it are just terribly boring, where the ball is just being knocked out. So, and I knew this was going to be a complete tactical battle, right? And it was all strategy, and I don't think Derry expected Galway to set up the way they set up. Like Gallagher, you could hear him in the interview, they were surprised by the fact that Galway sat in and said, okay, well, let's see what you got. And even after the first, it was 3-0, Galway still kind of went, come on, keep coming, and they played it really, really well with Comer, I felt, with allowing Rodgers, kind of half going back with him, but actually saying, listen, you're going to eventually tire yourself out, and I am going to be the main man up the far end. And when it comes to the scores, you can nearly see Joyce talking to him in the pre-match build-up. He was like, you're going to have an influence on this. Because it's funny how you play Rodgers. I'd nearly put a half back or a half forward on Rodgers because Rodgers is actually one of the main ball carriers for Derry and has clipped points all the time. But anyway, my point being, I think that Galway, with the management team, they will have a completely different style for this game, and they will completely different setup. And I think they're definitely a horses for courses team. Like they have no problem changing their setup. They've no problem changing their strategy. They've no problem changing personnel into doing different jobs, and they all accept that. Which is, by the way, it's the hard thing to do. By the way, like Derry did not have a plan B on Saturday. Galway have A, B, and C now. It seems to me. They can go long, they can go hard, they can run it hard, they can defensively, hold. And if you go back, like a lot of credit has to go to Kevin Walsh and all that, because for years Galway was a team where it was just a shootout. You'd score 20, they'd score 21. Whereas now they can do it either way. Yeah. And that's going to be a tricky thing for Kerry.
I think body language as well, Ger. I think they just had this, they gave this impression that they weren't flustered at all. And like Galway scored about 1 point in the first half an hour, give or take. And it hadn't happened for a lot of their forwards. It was very frustrating. They just looked very, very relaxed. And I thought like 5 minutes in the second half, that game was over. Galway they knew they were winning the game. And they just look, for a team that has no history of winning at Croke Park, they look very comfortable there now. They look happy, and they have. I think Galway have scoring quality to win this game without a shadow of a doubt, because I think Finnerty will play better the next day. Shane Walsh, I don't think he scored even from play. His frees were unbelievable, by the way. I'm not sure I've ever seen a footballer so talented off both feet. It's incredible. Like
Clifford, but yeah.
Well, for a guy who wasn't really in the game in normal play, his frees were unbelievable, because he was even his first free that he had to come out and kick with the left wasn't an easy free, and he just drilled it over.
More two-footed than Clifford, is he? That is, you're seeing two of the greatest, the most, like what do they call him? Like the jazz musician among, like, you know, crappy music. He is whatever they call him. He's like, I've never seen a guy so comfortable. Like, and he taking frees from like 40 yards out in the wing, left foot, right foot, and they just seem to have a belief, considering they've no history of really winning anything. It's weird. Maybe it's Cian O'Neill as well. I don't know what.
I mean, it's not. It doesn't seem like it's a coincidence that Cian O'Neill's like they've now got this defensive structure, and also I don't know. He just seems to be like the perfect add-on in a backroom team. It's really unfortunate it didn't work out for him when he was the big dog in Kildare.
What did they do with Clifford though?
I don't know what, like, no one knows what to do with Clifford in the first half, but in the second half, like, Michael Fitzsimons broke even.
He broke even. I think, I'm not sure how much the wind was. The wind was a factor, but I'm not sure how much of a factor it was. He certainly seemed to be.
Does the wind explain the bad wides happening at the same end?
In the first half, yeah. Dublin went. Like, some of the kicks just tailed off, but what it does is it restricts obviously the area that you can kick from. So normally you're kicking from 40, 45 metres, which Clifford would be on the turn. Now he's thinking, actually, I can't do that. I need to come into about 30, 35. So therefore, he's making his run closer to goal. He's starting his run closer to goal. The ball in. It does have an impact. It does have an impact, but. What to do with him is the question. Like, will Galway? I think Galway will have a kind of a welcoming party for him. In other words, I don't think they'll just have Kelly on him. Silk is a very, very good cornerback and did an unbelievable job. Could they? I don't think they'll switch Daly out of 6 because he's just having an unbelievable year. Very, very good going forward. Can pick a pass, gets his head up, feeds Comer very, very well. Very intelligent footballer. So, I think it's an issue. But like O'Neill. That's what I'm saying. O'Neill, for me, is having a major influence, and Porrick deserves massive credit, because sometimes fellas will listen to your coach and then go, fine, but actually I'm going to do my own thing, thanks very much. But you can see O'Neill's influence stamped on it, in the sense of, I think he always was a guy who would set up relative to say, I'm going to take the main weapons away from the opposition team. So the main weapon for me is that is the big one. Like, Seanie O'Shea is a different type of player. He's not going to do to you what Clifford can do to you. And that could be the rock I perish on. But I think Clifford is everything and encapsulates everything about that Kerry team, and has become and is their leader, and is the sense of, if you can shut him down. And that's why it's kind of strange. Honestly, I thought that first half, especially if you're the more benign conditions, that Fitzsimons was nearly left one-on-one with him. Yeah. I thought Dublin should have brought some support back into him, especially when they were struggling a bit. Get someone in around him and just double team him. Take someone out from around the middle area, double team him, and just say, right, that's what we're going to do. Maybe Dublin were confident enough to say, no, you can go ahead and do the job, Mick. But I think Galway probably possibly have to do that. Maybe
you have to decide, okay, anything less than 10 points, you've done well, and we're going to keep, if you can just keep him to 10 points, the rest of us are going to look after everybody else.
Everyone else.
I don't know.
Yeah.
There's definitely some part of it. Shifty Lad wants to know, what did you think about the goalkeeper wasting almost 5 minutes of a black card by feigning injury before the penalty? Good thinking or just cute whore? In fairness, like, some Dublin fans I was talking to afterwards were complaining about Kerry being cynical. I was like, lads, I mean, you guys, what?
John Small was black carded at the time.
Yeah. So John Small was black carded, and
they managed it well. The hand went up, if you see it straight away, right?
Illness.
Yeah, Johnny Cooper puts his hand up in the air. So Small goes off, they win the ball, and Johnny Cooper puts his hand up in the air, and he holds it up there for kind of usually Scully used to do this, where he put the hand up in the air. Well, Cooper puts it up and leaves it up there. So it essentially was, and what they did was, they do it very well, because they don't just play the ball across and back. They kind of pretend to you, we're going to go forward, and they go forward, and then they come back again, and then they go forward. But it's all about just maintaining the ball. It's all about maintaining the ball.
That aspect of Gaelic football now, as somebody who's not watching it every day of the week, is something that I think people have a serious issue with, because it's boring. It's simply boring. And like the game on, like, what I'm not sure who you're referencing in terms of an All-Ireland semi-final on Saturday, who says, like, I'm never going to get my hour back there. Yeah. So I don't know if you.
That was a brother of mine. Yeah.
Obviously, Derry lost the game, but like there's nothing inherently. It's almost like morphing into a bad game of soccer at times, where it's just possession for the sake of possession. And Derry were doing that in the sense of just literally wasting time. and it's not good to watch. And if you go from a hurling game to a football game, it's an amazingly negative contrast for Gaelic football. And I do think a lot of purists, and the final will be interesting because I think we will have two proper purists.
No.
But how much are they going to morph into the fact that they also need to win?
Kerry 15 men behind the ball, and
They
were
did,
very Derry-esque in that first half. And
No,
they were really happy for Dublin to have the ball. So, like,
I think, yeah,
Kerry are purists anymore. Like,
But you can't-
Eamon Fitzmaurice, his team won a very boring All-Ireland final by being very defensive and pouncing on a mistake. The notion that Kerry have been like a swashbuckling, go forward, go, not true.
Yeah, but you had to change.
Yeah, exactly. But that's the evolution of the game.
In relative terms, I think this final, it'll be interesting to see how much they morph into that, because I think it's an aspect of Gaelic football now that people have a serious issue with. Whether they put a clock on it where it's like basketball, you just have to get rid of the ball after a while. Because that point that Kerry got that I think it took 3 minutes, and eventually Clifford got, I don't find that enjoyable. 3 minutes of possession in Gaelic football for me, and I think Ger Canning's like, oh my God, that was an amazing point. I was like, was it? I think you have to have... Yeah, I mean, is that what people want to watch?
They don't want to watch it. But you know,
is it entertaining?
Well, I used to.
The crowd literally starts talking to each other. They just start talking to each other.
I know.
And at the game on Saturday, I was at 2 All-Ireland semi-finals in the last 2 weeks. The hurling game was like literally being thrown into like a bull ring for 70 minutes, and like what happened there? The football, you spend half the game talking. You literally spend half the game talking.
I know. So there's two things. Either again we can start tinkering with the rules again, which I think is just, you know, the consequences of that, you know, who knows. So I used to when I was young, Johnny, way back then, and I used to come home on a Monday night and I would go to my apartment, and I was young, free and single, playing football, and I'd say, right, Monday night football, and it was Wolves versus Sheffield. I was like, oh jeez, seriously, this is what I have to do on my Monday evening. And it was just 90 minutes of pure absolute boredom as lads just kicked the ball around, and there was no inventiveness, there was no ingenuity, there was no pace, there was no... So I think every sport has to go and adapt. And for me, and we've spoken about this lots of times, I think the team that takes the risk, the calculated risk, right? And not being an absolute lunatic about it, but it's the calculated risk, and it's trying to change the game with unbelievably. Well, bringing the goalie out, we'll get back to that, but bringing the goalie out absolutely to a certain degree, right? But if you look at, say, the rugby on Saturday or whatever it was, like the team that are able to now, rugby became like just right, but the team that was able to offload in the tackle, so, you know, turn on your back, pop up, that's the time. So every game has to adapt. So, for example, you know, you think about Gaelic football, at that time when Dublin were down to 14 men, how the heck why didn't Kerry do a massive press on them?
Don't know.
Just do a massive press on them. But instead, they actually allowed them have the ball. And it was like Kerry said, we're going to take a break here too. Whereas straight away I'd be saying, right, we're just doing a massive squeeze on them. Get everyone up, get the keeper pushed up, and we all squeeze up the pitch, and we even squeeze up in comfort, and let's make hay while the sun shines. It's like the you know, the sin bin in rugby. How many scores can you get when they're down to 14? So every game has to adapt, every game has to, and so for against Derry, which I thought was an interesting ploy by Galway, that's why I think Gallagher did not expect that. I think he got thrown a complete curveball by that, and I think the Derry players were too. The Derry players seemed shocked, and when Comer got that goal, it was nearly like everyone went, huh, that's it, the game's up.
It was done because we don't have a plan B here. Like,
yeah, and neither did we get ready for this.
Yeah,
and actually,
I do think a lot of Derry fans would have left the ground thinking like that was horrible to watch, and like it was horrible in the second half because we knew the game was over. Yeah. And like we can play like that, but at the same time we got 6 points in 70 minutes.
Yeah, so anyway, I think that ultimately is where you go. Like the Jim McGuinness brought something different to football, but ultimately it was beaten because people worked it out and said, well, actually, this is what we can do for that.
Yeah, it's evolution, but I think people's attention span is so bad now that they can't necessarily sit through that regularly because a lot of it is quite boring.
It is, but I'm still a firm believer, and maybe this is just a meanness in it, but like the fastest thing from get to A to B is you kick the ball, right? So if you want to move the ball fast, you need to get, you know, one-touch football and get the ball out of there.
Kerry were doing a good bit of that, actually.
They were, and I think, you know, but at times, again, you know, you have to manage the game, you know, and that's it.
We need to talk about the Tailteann Cup very briefly. Notwithstanding the bad idea of having the North and South, or whatever that was called, ultimately, when the teams who never played each other, it got good and exciting, and teams playing other teams of a similar standard in the summer is really good for them.
Who would have thought that, huh? I pretty genius, really, when you think of it. That out of the box thinking. Like, I was absolutely, I felt for Cavan because I thought it was an absolute humdinger of a game. Like, it could have went either way. Absolutely, I think Cavan will feel aggrieved over a couple of things, but ultimately both teams going full throttle to win a piece of silverware. And I've often said this: it doesn't make a difference what it is. It could be a pre-season competition on Achill Island. To win a piece of silverware for any group is an achievement. It's an achievement. You put it into the trophy cabinet and you get medals, and you look at it and you say, well, there it is. There is the reason why we're doing what we're doing. Yeah. And the importance of that can't be lost on anyone. Not alone the authorities and the hierarchy who set these things up. So delighted for Westmeath. Westmeath have been doing an awful lot of work. It just shows you, Ger, like Leinster football gets a bad rep, it really does. And the Meath job is in the, is up there for grabs at the moment, and people are kind of whether people want to take it or not want to take it. The big bad issue is that you've got the behemoth, which is Dublin, sitting there, which, by the way, when they beat you, it just knocks the daylights out of your whole year, and you have to pick everyone up, because you can't go into that game, or maybe you can, kind of saying, oh, don't worry about this, we'll just go on to the next day. You have to prepare, because players will demand that they go in with a fighting chance. So what happens in an awful lot of Leinster teams is that the guts are kicked out of them after a Dublin performance. Yeah. And to see the Westmeath lads celebrate, to see the way they played, the confidence that they had, the enthusiasm, the intensity, the front free running, it was just absolutely brilliant. Now I have to say, and a fair play to them, and fair play to Cavan, and you know what,
the amount of proper football fans from Cavan who stayed for the second game, like, I think that's testament to these are proper football fans. They stayed to watch Galway and Derry, which itself was tough as a Galway fan at times. Yeah. They stayed. The amount of Cavan people in the ground, I thought was
twice.
really cool. Like, it was really endearing.
Yeah. All right. Anthony, good stuff.
No bother, lads.
Call the final for me now before we actually.
Galway.
Wow. All right. You've made Johnny very happy this morning.
4-1 against her.
There you go. Right. A reminder.